Necromunda Hired Gun is a game I've been interested in for quite a few months. I've never really truly been into the 40k franchise. The universe is interesting, don't get me wrong, however they've never really made anything advertising to my target demographic. Necromunda changes that though, as it's obviously heavily inspired by Doom's reboot. On the surface, this looks like an obvious fast-paced first-person shooter action game, and that's right down my alley. That is certainly what it is, but it hits some snags. Necromunda is a game with a bunch of good ideas, with terrible implementation. You might have seen this story before, but I'm very mixed on this game. I guess let's start with some good. Graphically, this game is rather impressive. Now, they've classified it as an indie game, but this seems to be more of a AA studio. Certainly not AAA though, and for a AA studio, this does look really good. As a PC port, I don't have any complaints. It worked exactly as intended. Every option I expected to be here is here. Yes, including an FOV slider. Although curiously enough, they label this as vertical FOV when it's clearly not vertical FOV. The lowest the FOV can go is 78. Vertically, that would be 110 horizontal FOV, so yeah, it's definitely not vertical. You can raise it up to 90, that would be around 121, that would give you a lot of fisheye, so again, this is clearly horizontal FOV. I'm not complaining, an FOV slider is a good thing, this is just funny. Anyway, as I was saying, all the options you would want are here, and it even implements NVIDIA DLSS. As someone with a 3080, I love the DLSS is being used more. It's some amazing tech that will be giving you huge FPS boost. Now my monitor can only display up to 60 Hz, so I cap my frame rate at 60. This also gives my GPU a little bit more room for OBS to work. However, when I uncapped the frame rate, I was getting averages of around 140. To give you an idea, I have an AMD 3700X, 32GB of DDR4 memory at 3600 MHz, an NVIDIA 3080, and all of this is running off an M.2 drive. Now my computer is a little overdone, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because new games oftentimes will have problems with stuttering and whatnot, and in this case I didn't have any of those issues. I did see some reports saying that DirectX 12 caused stuttering, which is definitely the case in some previous games like say Battlefield 1, but in the case of this game I didn't have those issues either. Also, I was playing at 1440p, which I forgot to mention. So yeah, as far as performance goes, this game seems to run pretty well. This isn't the best game I've ever seen graphically, but it's still very good looking. Texture work and animations can be a little hit or miss, but the lighting is pretty good and so are the particle effects. There's a ton of particle effects, so this video is probably not doing this game justice. The footage you're seeing is from my stream, and anytime you see things like lots of smoke or sparks or maybe dirt from explosions, that's going to make the game look a little bit worse. It doesn't look this way to you as you're playing, that's just an effect of what happens when you stream. So yeah, overall I'm pretty impressed with both the graphics and the PC release. Granted, a lot of this is the aesthetic holding up the game. This universe has always had some of the most interesting designs. Hell, as I've said, I've never been interested in 40k, but when I see something from 40k, I know that it's from that universe. The development studio has a lot of respect for the source material, and it shows. If you're a 40k fan, which from what I've seen sometimes can look like a cult because people really like 40k, you will definitely appreciate this aspect. I don't share the same enthusiasm when it comes to the story. The way the story is presented to you is rather boring and also never makes any sense. The story is going to play out the same way in between every mission. You go to a hub world, you talk to a bartender, she tells you something, you go talk to Jericho, he drops some names, and he drops some names about a few gangs doing a few things that he's heard about, he tells you to talk to someone else, they say, no, I don't know where those gangs are, but I know what they might be doing, so go check this out, then you start the next mission. You have no context for why these people are important or for what they're doing. All of this is just to push you along to the next mission. You never grow any attachment to the main character, you never grow any attachment to any of the side characters, you talk to basically only 3 the whole game. If they do ever introduce someone else, maybe a gang leader, you will go rescue him and then he won't matter for the rest of the game, or maybe he'll die in the next mission. Doesn't matter, you shouldn't care. Now, at first I assumed this was because I knew nothing about 40k. It's not the first time a game has expected you to know the greater lore of its universe. I mean, look at Halo 5, they expect you to know all of these new characters and Spartans from the books. I've not read the books, I don't care, I care about the games. A good story should always be self-contained within that game, even if you're brand new to the franchise. However, this doesn't seem to be what is happening. From what I gathered from the people in my stream, even if you know about 40k, you'll have no idea what is going on. So to reiterate, the story really just is to push you along to the next mission. You can totally ignore it if you want to. And you may really want to because it's incredibly boring. Almost the whole story is presented to you by just dialogue. You stand in place, NPC stands in place, he talks at you. You have this interesting, huge universe. You could have done so much more than going back to the same hub world every time and talking to the same 3 people in the same place. So yeah, if you were expecting more out of a 40k game and wanted to see a lot more of the universe, you might be a little disappointed here. However, as a player, I've always been someone that focuses the most on gameplay. Everything else can be totally ignored if the gameplay is really good. That's unfortunately not the case, but I'm kind of mixed on the gameplay in this game. Again, let's start with the good. This game is obviously inspired by Doom 2016. It wants to be fast and gives you a lot of movement options. For starters, if you're standing in place, you'll crouch, yes, but if you press crouch while you're running, you'll start sliding. If you jump and press crouch, you will do a boost in the air. You can only boost once until you land, but you don't have any cooldown on the boost, so you can boost all over. In the air, you have a double jump and can also wall run. Wall running never really seemed to be that effective, like there just didn't seem to be places to do it in the middle of combat, so it's neat that it's there, but I would oftentimes just forget. The next thing is the grappling hook, which is pretty useful. The movement almost feels like a combination of Doom Eternal and Titanfall. It doesn't feel quite as good as those two games, but those are high bars to reach when it comes to movement. It does feel intuitive though and adds a lot to the game, especially since with the grappling hook you can grab onto enemies and pull yourself closer. Doing this will also get rid of their shields, which then you can melee kill, and the melee kills are kind of busted. This doesn't work like say glory kills in Doom where you have to stagger enemies first. No, you can just straight up walk up to them, press the use key, and go into an animation. While you're doing this, you're totally invincible, so these can be very broken. These animations are also really buggy and just don't look good. Occasionally, even this stuff can happen. What the? What happened? Now, I actually like the fact that you can't take damage during these animations because dying in in-game cutscenes is really frustrating, but they definitely should have taken more of a Doom approach where you're forced to stun enemies before you can melee kill them. This is also what I meant by the animations being hit or miss. These melee animations are really bad, as I said. However, when you go to the guns, the reloading animations are pretty smooth. In fact, the gunplay in general feels pretty good. The guns mostly recoil appropriately, sound nice, and overall you do want to use them. The added mobility also allows you to be more well-suited to take on hordes of enemies. And while you're taking on hordes of enemies, the music is really fitting. It seems to be blatantly inspired by Doom, and that is not a bad thing. So it's got a good base, but this is where I start complaining. The health system doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You have shields and health. The shields are basically just armor, they don't recharge on their own. You have 3 medkits per mission. Otherwise, the way to get health back requires you to take damage first, and then within a limited time, hurt enemies to get health back. You heard that right, in order to get health, you have to take damage. So what happens if you're stuck with 10 health? I guess you just die! I understand the point is to try to keep you mobile, but it's a really stupid system that could have been done better. Speaking of stupid systems, this is where I talk about the fact that this game kind of wants to be a looter shooter, but not really at the same time, and it bogs the game down. One of the first things I did in this game was go to the gun shop, buy a new weapon, and then be totally confused on how the hell I equip it. Get this, there is no inventory menu in this game at all. Yes, you heard that right. You cannot pause the game, look at your inventory, and re-equip your weapons. This had me totally confused until I went to go start a mission and realized only there can you equip the weapons you want. Now, if this game wasn't trying to be a looter shooter, this wouldn't be a problem. Say, for example, at the beginning of each mission, you set your weapons, play through that mission, and then at the end of the mission, do it all over again. Here's the problem with that. Since this game kinda wants to be a looter shooter, you do find crates during missions. When you open these crates, guns pop out. 1, you can't see the stats of this weapon mid-mission. 2, you can pick it up and put it in your inventory, which then you can't equip it in any way whatsoever, you just are carrying it to the end of the mission. Or 3, you can hold down E, swap out your main gun, and now use that one instead, having no idea what you're using. Even this can be rather buggy. I remember one mission I found a shotgun that was clearly better than the one I had, or at least I assumed it was, so I held down E, picked up that shotgun instead of the one I was using, and then in the next room a cutscene triggered. When the cutscene ended, that shotgun was just gone. I just didn't have it anymore. You may say those guns are the same, but keep in mind this is part looter shooter, so a lot of the guns are the same visually, but they have different stats. You can tell by the 40-round drum mag, which is ridiculous for a shotgun, for the 20-round drum mag, which is still ridiculous for a shotgun. Anyway, you get the point. There really needs to be an inventory menu. I'm pretty sure their goal here was to have you spend most of your time outside of menus playing the game rather than looking at stats. My gut feeling is backed up by the end of every single mission, allowing you to choose what you want and then everything else being auto-sold away. What you have here on the right, this is all you can carry. Back to the gun vendor I was talking about. These menus are awful. There's no way to compare the weapons you want to buy with the weapons in your inventory. You can only compare them after you buy them. Why? I want to know that stuff before I buy it. Maybe there is a way to see, but I messed around forever and couldn't find it. The UI makes no sense. It is going to take you a long time before you figure out what the hell you're doing. There's also just a bunch of little tiny things that add up to being a huge nuisance. For example, if you compare two weapons and then you press escape thinking you'll just go back and stop comparing, it instead exits the entire menu immediately. Not a huge problem in its own right, but as I said, there's a bunch of these things that add up that become really annoying. And while we're at the gun vendor, there really isn't many options. Once you get to about 4 hours into the game, you basically can see every variation of weapon that's in the game, and then they just have different stats, and that's it. And while yes, that is sort of the point of a looter shooter, I do expect more content in this style of game. If there isn't more content, it just starts becoming very repetitive and stale. Just behind you are different upgrades you can get, which thankfully make a lot more sense. These are presented to you through simple skill trees, and all of this works as intended. Most of these upgrades are just passive upgrades, more defense, more health, stuff like that. However, you can unlock 7 or 8 abilities which do change the combat. They're all on separate cooldowns as well, so you can chain them together. For example, you can unlock bullet time, slow everything down, teleport to an enemy and blow them up with your hand, then do a stun attack and then just shoot at them until they eventually die. There's also another upgrade that will turn every one of your weapons into an alien smart gun. You ever wanted to unlock aimbot in your game? Well, here you go. Now this stuff is actually pretty cool, so I do give credit here. At the same doctor where you can get your upgrades, you can upgrade your Mastiff. This game heavily marketed the dog as an integral part of the game, and it's really not. See, I assumed that it would work like, say, Far Cry 5's buddy system, where you always have a cougar or a bear backing you up. You know, like a pet walking along by your side, attacking anyone that goes by, and if you need to revive it, then you have to revive it. That's not at all how the Mastiff works. It's more like a simple cooldown. You call it in with a squeaky toy, and then you have a limited dog time for it to attack things. Why? Why can't it just have this at any given moment? It's not like it's overpowered. In fact, it's not even that good. This dog can be rather stupid. The pathfinding is difficult. Sometimes it Supermans its way across the map, other times it can't get over a little pile of rubble. It also picks and chooses whether it wants to attack enemies or not, seemingly on its own, even if you're commanding it to attack something, so don't rely on it. Also, I apologize to anyone that really likes dogs. When you upgrade this thing, it becomes just a bunch of meat and metal, and it's kind of awesome. Yeah, you're horribly mutilating your dog, but it's fictional 40k stuff and not real, so in this context, it's pretty cool. Anyway, most of the upgrades you can get for your dog just upgrade its health and defense and attack power, stuff like that. Nothing really amazing. There is one more shop you can go to, and that's just simple upgrades to make your guns better. One of the unfortunate things about this system is that everything is tied to money. You obviously are never going to get anywhere near enough money to upgrade all these things at once. I kind of would have preferred it if you had some other kind of currency to unlock your skills and abilities compared to upgrading or buying new guns. As it stands, the end result is you end up getting everything bad out of looter shooters that you don't want. The game can feel grindy because the difficulty suddenly shoots up. Necromunda has a real case of enemies being bullet sponges. They just run through your damage doing a ton of damage to you. So most of the time I find myself dodging away from enemies rather than actually trying to fight them head on, which is in conflict with them trying to make the game fast paced. And since this game wants to hide the fact that it's part looter shooter, there's no levels or anything you can look at, there's not even health bars, so you have no idea how much health that enemy has. This is a real problem when it comes to bosses. You may be shooting at them for 5 or 10 minutes before they die without knowing if you're really doing that much damage. This can be really frustrating because the base combat is really enjoyable, but with all the looter shooter stuff shoved in, it just sort of ruins it. There are side missions you can do, which aren't very fun, stuff like capture objectives and whatnot. The only purpose for these is just to give you more money to upgrade yourself so that the game isn't so difficult. But the difficulty of this game doesn't feel like genuine difficulty, it just again turns enemies into bullet sponges and has them do more damage back to you. Like I said, you can understand what I mean by taking everything bad out of a looter shooter, and that's the result. This was ultimately the reason I started not enjoying this game. It started feeling tedious and rather annoying. I mean, hell, I just got done playing Dead Effect 2 and it does exactly what Necromunda wants to do, but better. And that game started as a mobile game. It's clear what you're buying in the menus, it's clear how much damage the weapons are going to do, it's clear how much damage you're doing to the enemies, and they never feel too bullet spongy. You also aren't going to be navigating menus in the middle of missions, you do it before and after in a hub world. Like I said, it's the same exact format, but just done way better. That's not to say Dead Effect 2 is perfect, that just shows how flawed Necromunda is in this regard. Again, they didn't even need these mechanics. They could have just done what Metro did instead. They could have had you exploring the 40k universe more in depth and going to different weapon vendors and shops. I don't need 20 of the same gun with different stats, just give me one that I can upgrade. As I said, it's disappointing because with a base that actually has very good movement and combat, bogging it down with all this extra stuff just sort of ruins the game for me. If you took all the looter shooter mechanics and chucked them out, I would give this game around a 7 out of 10. It would be pretty fun and enjoyable, but with the looter shooter mechanics, I would have to bump that down to a 6. It's not offensively bad, but it's something that I didn't really want to keep playing after around 5 hours. If I didn't plan on making this video, I wouldn't have. With that said, this game does have a really good base, and maybe after 3, 6 months, a year, it might be a good game. So if you're watching this video later offended that I'm insulting your favorite game that is apparently really good and you bought it after a sale, just note that it probably improved drastically over time. Again, it's not like I came into this game wanting to dislike it, because that's certainly not the case. I saw a game heavily inspired by Doom 2016 and wanted it to be good. We need more games like that. It just has too many things that make the game unenjoyable for me. So is this game worth your money? Unless you're a huge 40k fan and can look over all these downsides, I can't say I recommend it. At least not yet. With that said, I want to thank everyone that joined me over on Twitch while I was streaming this game. My Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. And a big thanks goes out to everyone that watched this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I will see you next time.